The German commander refused Eisenhower's order before the jeep even stopped, and as the iron gate slammed shut, a bleeding prisoner broke from the yard and ran straight toward the wire with both hands raised. A guard fired into the mud at his feet. Another struck him down with a rifle, and when the prisoner rolled onto his back, a folded list slipped from his coat with 7 names circled in red, all marked for removal before nightfall. Eisenhower stepped out of the jeep before the dust settled behind the convoy, and every man at the gate saw that he was not looking at the German commander first, but at the prisoner lying in the mud with one hand still reaching toward the wire. The camp commander, Colonel Ernst Keller, ordered his guards to drag the man away, yet Eisenhower raised his hand, stopped his own escorts from rushing forward, and told the nearest MP to take the paper before anyone inside the camp could touch it. The MP pulled the folded list through the lower wire and handed it over with mud across the pencil marks. 7 names were circled, each one followed by a Barak number, a prisoner tag, and a narrow black line that looked like a deadline. Eisenhower read the final words at the bottom, then looked past the gate toward the transport trucks parked behind the infirmary, where German guards were already forcing men into a line. Keller shouted that the prisoner was unstable and that the paper meant nothing, but his voice came too quickly, and his guards moved too fast toward the same truck. Eisenhower gave one order to the American captain beside him, and within seconds the convoy road was blocked by 2 jeeps while MPs moved along the fence to cut off the rear path. The refusal at the gate had become a race before Keller understood the race had already begun. The commander tried to regain control by locking the gate chain with his own hand. He told Eisenhower that no Allied officer could enter until transfer authority was confirmed in writing, then lifted the torn copy of Eisenhower's previous order and threw it into the mud between them. The gesture was meant to humiliate, but it made the prisoners turn their heads, and for one dangerous second the whole yard saw that the American general had been openly defied. Eisenhower did not answer with anger. He pointed to the bleeding prisoner, then to the trucks, then to the list in his hand, and ordered the camp sealed from all sides. American engineers ran toward the service fence with bolt cutters while MPs spread along the road, and the German guards inside the yard began shouting over one another as the neat formation around Keller broke into confused movement. A guard near the infirmary tried to move one of the circled men into the truck before the Americans reached the side fence. The prisoner resisted. Another man grabbed his sleeve, and the guard struck both of them hard enough to pull the crowd forward. Eisenhower saw the surge and ordered the MPs not to fire, but to breach the side latch and take the transport line first. The latch snapped open, and the 1st American squad entered through the service fence instead of the main gate. Keller turned in shock, because the gate he had slammed shut no longer mattered. The squad crossed the yard at a run, pushed between the trucks and the prisoners, and forced the German guards to step back from the men whose names were on the list. The bleeding prisoner was carried toward the American side of the wire, still conscious enough to grip Eisenhower's sleeve when the medics reached him. He whispered one sentence through broken breath, saying the 7th name had already been taken before dawn. Eisenhower looked again at the list, saw the final circled name, and ordered every truck searched before the sun dropped behind the trees. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The first truck search began with the tailgate thrown open and 3 German guards shoved away from the canvas cover. Inside were blankets, empty food crates, and a locked medical chest that did not belong on a prisoner transport. An MP struck the lock with the butt of his rifle, and when the lid split open, the chest revealed rolled bandages, prisoner tags, and several coats with numbers cut from the collars. Eisenhower ordered each coat carried into the yard and matched against the men on the list. Keller shouted that the coats came from dead prisoners whose records had already been filed, but one prisoner in the line pushed forward and pointed to his sleeve with a repaired tear. He said the coat belonged to a man taken from Barak before sunrise, and before the guard beside him could silence him, 2 MPs pulled the guard away. The escalation moved fast because Keller's men began destroying evidence in separate corners of the camp. Smoke rose from behind the records hut. A clerk ran with a canvas bag toward the latrines, and two guards tried to drag a feverish prisoner out of the infirmary side door. Eisenhower split his force into three groups at once, sending one to the fire, one to the clerk, and one to the infirmary, turning Keller's hiding places into separate battle lines. The clerk reached the latrine trench and threw the bag down, but an American corporal tackled him before the papers sank into the waste pit. The bag split open across the ground, spilling transfer slips, ration cards, and 5 death notices that had not yet been dated. The corporal held one notice up, and the name at the top matched the missing 7th man from Eisenhower's list. At the records hut, the fire was already eating through a wooden drawer when engineers broke the window and pulled the cabinet into the yard. Charred pages scattered under their boots, but one surviving ledger showed the same 7 names moved from medical watch to night transfer in a single hand. The handwriting matched Keller's signature on the torn order copy, still lying near the main gate. The infirmary became the most violent point. 2 German guards were trying to move a prisoner on a stretcher through the rear door, not toward treatment, but toward the truck path. The American medics blocked them. The guards shoved back, and one of the sick men fell from the stretcher as the room erupted into movement. Eisenhower entered behind the MPs and ordered the guards disarmed in front of the patients. That order stripped Keller's authority piece by piece. His guards no longer controlled the trucks, the records, or the infirmary, and the prisoners saw it happen in real time. Men who had kept their eyes down began pointing toward locked doors, whispering names, and lifting sleeves to show hidden numbers written in charcoal, as if they had prepared for one chance and could not believe it had arrived. Keller changed his strategy again. He walked into the center of the yard and accused the Americans of creating a riot that would get prisoners killed. At that exact moment, a shout came from the rear fence, where an MP found fresh boot tracks leading into the drainage ditch beyond the wire. Eisenhower looked from the tracks to the missing name on the death notice, and the chase moved outside the camp. The drainage ditch ran behind the laundry building and curved into a line of trees where the ground had been beaten flat by repeated night traffic. Eisenhower sent a patrol down the ditch while the rest of the camp remained sealed, and within minutes the patrol found a strip of torn prison cloth snagged on a branch, then a blood smear on a stone where someone had been forced to climb. The trail led to an abandoned tool shed beyond the outer fence, a place not marked on the official camp map. When the door was kicked open, the Americans found the missing 7th prisoner tied to a chair, alive but barely able to lift his head. Beside him lay a German guard's belt, a water cup kicked out of reach, and a blank escape report already filled with his name. The major consequence landed all at once. Keller had not only refused an order and hidden prisoners, he had prepared false escape reports for men who were still alive. Eisenhower ordered the prisoner carried back through the main gate, not through the side fence, because every man in the yard needed to see that the supposed escapee had been found bound and wounded outside Keller's official control. The sight broke the camp open. Prisoners shouted the missing man's name, medics rushed forward, and Keller's own guards stepped backward as if the returning body had accused them without speaking. Keller tried to claim the man had been captured after an escape attempt, but the blank report in the American captain's hand was dated for the next morning, and the ink on Keller's signature had not dried. Eisenhower ordered Keller confined to the commander's office under guard while the investigation continued, but Keller used the walk across the yard to signal one of his lieutenants with a sharp movement of his fingers. The lieutenant immediately turned toward Barrack 6, where several prisoners from the circled list had been held under special watch. An MP caught the movement, followed him, and found the barrack doors being bolted from the outside. Inside Barrack 6, the air was heavy with panic because the men had been told they would be shot if they spoke to the Americans. One prisoner had hidden a small notebook beneath a loose floorboard, and when the floorboard came up, the notebook revealed dates, night removals, and names of guards who had taken men toward the drainage ditch. The entry showed that the 7 circled names were only the final group, not the first. Eisenhower had the notebook read aloud to 2 translators and copied immediately. He then ordered a full medical count, a full prisoner count, and a guard-by-guard separation before darkness. The consequence was no longer private abuse inside one barrack. It was a system of false removals, forged reports, and planned disappearances operating under the commander's direct order. As the count began, the first real threat of collapse appeared. Keller's loyal guards refused to line up separately and locked arms near the cookhouse, while regular German prisoners moved away from them with visible fear. The camp was no longer divided between Americans and Germans only. It was dividing inside itself, and Eisenhower had to stop Keller's men before the last witnesses were attacked. The major reversal came when Keller's own lieutenant, the same man who had tried to bolt Barrack 6, suddenly walked toward Eisenhower with both hands raised and a key ring hanging from one finger. The MPs almost pushed him to the ground, but he shouted that Keller had a second plan for the night, not to move prisoners by truck anymore, but to burn the commander's office and escape through the laundry cellar during the confusion. Eisenhower ordered him searched, then made him prove it. The lieutenant led the Americans beneath the laundry building, where a trapdoor had been hidden under wet canvas and coal dust. Beneath it, a narrow passage ran toward the drainage line, and inside the passage they found civilian coats, forged Allied movement papers, and a small radio packed in straw. The reversal struck harder than the earlier evidence because Keller was no longer only hiding crimes. He was preparing to disappear before he could be arrested. Eisenhower ordered the office surrounded at once, but as the MPs turned toward it, smoke burst from the rear window. Keller had already started the fire. The race shifted again. Engineers ran with axes, medics dragged patients away from the smoke, and MPs smashed through the office door while flames climbed the curtains behind Keller's desk. A metal box sat under the desk with the lock half broken, and when an American sergeant pulled it free, Keller lunged from the smoke and tried to kick it back into the fire. 2 MPs tackled him across the floor before he reached the box. Keller fought like a man trying to destroy his own future, twisting under their hands while sparks fell across his coat. Eisenhower stepped into the doorway through the smoke and ordered the box carried into the yard before it burned, then ordered Keller dragged outside alive, because dead men could not answer for the names inside. The box contained the final roster, but not the official one. It listed prisoners by category, witness, sick, troublemaker, interpreter, and removal risk. The 7 circled names from the original list were marked under the last column, with tonight's date written beside them. Beneath the roster were letters meant for an outside contact, explaining that Allied inspection had arrived early and that the problem prisoners had to vanish before morning. The lieutenant who had betrayed Keller identified the outside contact as a former camp security officer hiding near the road junction. Eisenhower ordered a patrol sent immediately, and within 20 minutes they returned with the man captured beside a motorcycle, carrying fuel tins, a pistol, and a copy of the tunnel map. Keller's escape route, his arson plan, and his outside help had all been exposed in front of the camp. The reversal destroyed the last image Keller had tried to preserve. He had begun the day as a commander refusing an order from behind a locked gate. But now he stood handcuffed in the yard while his own lieutenant pointed to the tunnel. His own records lay open on a table, and his own escape papers proved that the man claiming authority had been preparing to abandon everyone before dawn. The final irreversible event began after midnight, when the full count revealed that 4 prisoners were still missing despite the recovered 7th man. Keller refused to speak, even with smoke on his uniform and handcuffs on his wrists, but Eisenhower ordered the captured outside contact brought forward and placed beside the tunnel map. The man looked at Keller once, saw that no rescue was coming, and pointed to a storage pit beyond the fuel shed. The MPs reached the fuel shed with lanterns and found the ground freshly covered with boards and loose soil. Under the boards was a narrow pit with air holes cut through a pipe, and inside were the four missing prisoners, bound together, alive, and hidden beneath empty fuel drums. One of them still had a death tag tied to his wrist, prepared before his body had even been found. The prisoners were lifted out one by one, while the whole camp watched from behind the guard lines. No one needed a speech to understand what had happened. The men Keller had marked for removal were alive under the ground. The trucks were blocked, the tunnel was sealed, the radio was captured, and the false death papers had failed before they could become official truth. Keller made one final move when the last prisoner was carried past him. He stepped toward the man and said something in German, low and sharp, and one loyal guard broke from the line with a hidden knife pulled from his boot. The guard lunged toward the rescued prisoner, but a regular German sergeant tackled him from the side before the MPs fired, sending both men crashing into the mud beneath the floodlights. That moment ended Keller's control more completely than the handcuffs. His own prisoners had stopped his last loyal guard, and the yard erupted not with celebration, but with movement as men stepped away from Keller's faction and toward the American lines. Eisenhower ordered every loyal guard removed separately, every witness protected, and every rescued prisoner placed under medical escort before Keller could threaten another name. Then Eisenhower did the one thing Keller had feared most. He ordered the false roster, the real roster, the escape reports, the death tags, and the tunnel map pinned side by side on boards at the main gate. Every prisoner was marched past them in groups. Every American officer signed as witness, and every German clerk who had handled the papers was made to identify the handwriting in public. Keller was brought to the boards last. Eisenhower did not raise his voice and did not allow the crowd to touch him. He simply ordered the interpreter to read the 7 circled names, then the 4 recovered names, then the false death dates that had been prepared in advance. With each name, Keller's refusal became smaller and the evidence around him became impossible to bury. At dawn, Keller was taken through the same gate he had slammed in Eisenhower's face. This time the chain was held by American MPs, the prisoners stood under protection, and the rescued men were alive behind the medical line. The final act could not be reversed because the camp no longer belonged to the man who had controlled the lists. It belonged to the witnesses he had failed to erase. When the ambulances rolled out, Eisenhower stopped beside the gate and looked at the torn order still pressed into the mud. He had it lifted, dried, and placed with the red-circled list, because the refusal that was meant to keep the camp closed had opened every hidden passage, every false death, and every buried name. Keller left in custody before sunrise, while the men he tried to erase watched their names written back into the living roll. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WWII stories.